Matthew Stone, listen, thanks for joining us on
Thanks for having me.
ProCast, Ministry of Finance's podcast. You're just talking about topical procurement issues. And today we're just going to have a chat about predictive analytics in action. But before I start, I just want you to just introduce yourself. I know we met before in Montego Bay, but
Yeah, we did.
I know you're a popular man in the AI space, but I can't take it for granted that our procurement practitioners know who you are. So just tell us about yourself, Matthew.
So I'm Matthew Stone, CEO of Stone Technologies Limited. Been involved with robotics for about, let's say, a decade now. We're currently actually working on a drone that can pick coconuts, by the way. And I was actually involved in the nation's first drone light show. If you guys remember that, on August 6, 2022, so the 60th independence. Yes. So yeah, that was a very good event that I was involved with. I'm also the president of the Jamaica Artificial Intelligence Association. I recognize the impact that AI would have on the country, the whole world, and I wanted to create a community that could bring Jamaicans together under the same roof with regards to AI. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Love it, Matthew. I mean, you said a lot just now, but I'm sorry, I have to pause a bit here. You mentioned that you're going to use drones to pick coconuts.
Yeah.
Like, just tell us a little bit about that, Matthew, because that really sounds fascinating.
I've always been interested in drones. It's kind of one of the reasons why I got involved with the Jamaica 60 Light Show. But we essentially knew that harvesting is a very manual intensive process. But the issue right now, especially in the coconut industry, is there aren't many people that want to climb up coconut trees right now, especially young people. They don't want to climb up in the hot sun to pick a coconut. So we're actually facing a major issue in the coconut industry where we might not be able to get coconuts because nobody wants to climb the tree. Plus, it's a very dangerous job. So there needs to be automation. So we came up with the idea of essentially utilizing drones to essentially pick coconuts. So we're still in the prototyping stage, still working on the technology, but we think it's something that can have a profound effect on the coconut industry going forward.
Nice, Matthew. So what I do in the procurement space, I'm a public procurement analyst with the Ministry of Finance, and we buy everything. So a lot of people don't know this, but we actually buy coconuts.
Oh, really?
So yeah, man, we buy from road works to equipment for the hospitals, entities such as, I believe, RADA, seedlings and so on. So interestingly, yes, we buy everything. Now, the other day, Matthew, I was watching a video, 60 minutes, and the video was titled, Training AI Takes Heavy Toll on Kenyans.
Yeah.
And they're working, guess how much per hour?
I think I saw it. That was around $2. Or
$2 an hour. Let me ask you a question. As a man in the AI space, we just talk about coconuts, but would you work for peanuts?
Well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't work for $2.
Yes.
I mean, everything has to be taken into context in terms of the economic standpoint in those countries. So maybe $2 to us isn't $2 to them. But at the same time, I must admit, that's very low for the type of job they're doing.
And the truth is, if you watch that video, our practitioners, we can check it out, because I found it really interesting. And I can tell you, the persons working in the space didn't believe that they were being paid well. And some of the things they said about working in the industry is that they feel like they're working in AI sweatshops, but just that there's an absence of sewing machines replaced with computers. They have short-term contracts, monthly paid contracts, monthly paid in some cases, weekly paid in some cases, and even daily contracts in some cases. But there seems to be a lot of positivity around this whole AI concept. There seems to be a lot of negativity. But before you respond on the notes around that video, Matthew, if there was for some reason, any practitioner here that has been living under a rock for the last 10 years, what is AI, Matthew?
What is AI? You know, the term AI has been used a lot lately, but it's not a new thing. You might think it's a new thing, but actually the term has been around since around 1950. So it came up around 1950. So a team in Dartmouth College, they coined the term AI. Essentially, AI describes automating any human task. So just imagine a task that a human would normally do, like even simple things like hearing, talking, seeing, writing, reading. Now machines can do those tasks. And it promises to essentially automate a lot of the tasks that we find a bit burdensome and tiresome. So right now you guys can write emails in a matter of seconds. I don't even really need to think when writing emails anymore. I can literally just go to ChatGPT, put in a prompt, and right there I have my email. But essentially, AI is involved in almost every product you use. And anytime you go and say Netflix and you see those wonderful recommendations, you're probably seeing a lot of Christmas recommendations now. Or when you go on Amazon and somehow Amazon knew that you wanted to buy that shoes, all of that is just utilizing your data and predicting what you would want to buy. So AI in a nutshell is more or less using data to make predictions.
How is it then different from automation, robotic automation, which is another term that interestingly was like a buzzword, but we don't hear it as much anymore. Robotic process automation.
So you see, AI is really a very big umbrella. It does encompass a lot of things. It encompasses machine learning. You may hear terms like data analysis, data science, robotic process automation, robotics. So all of it is really encompassed under AI. The overall thing is that AI is seeking to automate tasks that a human would normally have to do. So whether it's predictive analytics or robotic process automation, all of them are essentially trying to automate away human tasks.
Great. All right, so let's backtrack a bit then. So for those who have been under that cave, there you have it. That's AI in a nutshell, or in a coconut husk. Now, we spoke a bit about some of the negatives and the drawbacks, the ethical dilemmas around using these applications. Let's backtrack a bit now on that $2 an hour issue, right? Because you're not gonna work for peanuts, Matthew, right? Yeah, man. So how can software developers like yourself make a difference in that space, considering those issues that actually exist and some of the ones we touched on?
Right, so the incident you're speaking about with the workers in Kenya, so what they do is what you call data labeling. So the AI systems that you guys are using now, like ChatGPT, they essentially depend on data. So every time somebody uses the internet, every time you send a voice note, that's actual data that's going into the system. But you actually need humans to label this data. So you need a human to say, okay, that's probably not something a child should be looking at. All right, maybe that's safe for viewing. And it's a shame because none of these systems would exist without that data. But a lot of these companies are making billions, literally billions in profit. And as you said, they're literally paying these people peanuts. It's really exploitation at its finest. And I think it's something that could even come out here in Jamaica. We may see a point at which we have our own data labeling centers here, and it's going to be really pertinent on, say, the government to enact policies even before it comes here to ensure that we protect data labelers, ensure that they're not exploited, and ensure that they get the right, because it's a very psychologically intensive job, because they're looking at sometimes pornographic material.
Somebody has to label those things.
It's very, yeah. And sometimes, as I said in the video, they don't even have the proper counseling and, psychological treatment. So, yeah, we said we especially don't want something like that happening out here in Jamaica. So we definitely would have to enact policies to protect workers from something like that.
Wow. And I mean, you're a man in the space, Matthew. Really looking forward to you making that impact. A lot is happening in the tech space here in Jamaica. Persons are impressed. I'm impressed. You spoke about the drone show earlier. Is there anything happening? Well, I know there is. I was about to say, is there anything happening in that space of using AI in the space of procurement? Is there anything, any tools that your team is working on? Definitely talk to us about that Lawbot. I must confess, I don't sign up and try it out as yet, but I saw the post. You shared it on LinkedIn. You can find him on LinkedIn. You mentioned that you're the president, the founder of the Jamaica Artificial Intelligence Association. So if there's anything happening that can impact our space in procurement as well as the Lawbot, just tell us about it.
So, you know, as many of you watching here, we've had this scenario where we probably ended up in a situation where, because we didn't or we weren't aware of the laws on the books, we maybe got in a bit of trouble or we did something in a way we shouldn't have. And, you know, the first thing you think of is, all right, maybe I need to call a lawyer. And for many people, they just don't have lawyers. They can't afford lawyers. So essentially, the team and I from the Jamaica Artificial Intelligence Association, we recognized that essentially was a problem. And we came up with the idea of creating a Lawbot. So essentially, you interact with it over WhatsApp, and it has the knowledge base of like all the laws on the books in Jamaica. And just any scenario you may encounter, maybe a contract with your job, your employer, and maybe there's something in the contract that doesn't seem right. And maybe you got a traffic ticket and maybe something on it doesn't seem right. And maybe you just don't have a lawyer on hand to call. Then you can literally simply ask the Lawbot a question in WhatsApp, and it will literally, referencing the Jamaican laws, give you solid advice. So, and the key thing about it as well, it doesn't just make stuff up. So this is one of the drawbacks with using AI tools. Sometimes it will, what you call hallucinate, so it will make stuff up. But what makes our Lawbot different is that it will actually give you references to the actual legal documents that it's taking its responses from. So, you know, I found the tool pretty useful. I know others are using it. You know, especially when I'm having debates with my friends about some legal matter, just go on the Lawbot. And it
see what the law, not just the law and the references, but can it interpret? Because
so
at the OPPP, for example, which is the Office of Public Procurement Policy at the Ministry of Finance, we have an advisory unit, and public procurement practitioners, suppliers, media folks, just anyone can call in, they can write an email, and make an advisory request, and we provide that advice. Supported by the Public Procurement Act of the 2015 Public Procurement Act, as well as the 2018 Public Procurement Regulations. Can the Lawbot be used to support those tasks?
Yeah, of course. So it's not just like, it's not that it's just giving you back the law. Because, I mean, let's be honest, most times when we read law jargon, it's very jarring, unless you've studied law. But it breaks it down into a simple way. And as you say, it interprets it and it answers your question like how you say, ask a friend. You know, let's say you're in trouble and you ask a friend, like, hey, what should I do about this? And it answers it in that way, as well as give you references to where it, so at least you can know where it's getting its responses from. So if you're unsure of whether it's correct, you can reference back that legal act. So it will say, based on the 2015 Procurement Act, and it's the literal page number, and you can reference it to say, oh, well, it's not making it up, it's actually coming from the actual legal document.
So for example, on our website, procureja.com, we have some FAQs, frequently asked questions documents, wholly created by our team, very useful. Could we have such a plug on our website using that Lawbot? So instead of going in that area and search those documents, or not just instead of, but supporting, that Lawbot could be plugged onto our website, for example, and persons could search there, and then if for some reason that Lawbot can't help, it then pushes the queries over to our office?
The key thing about, or the way how we did the law, but it can apply to anything.
Okay.
So it's not just laws, right? We're actually planning to extend it to other functionalities soon. So, finance, other stuff people are interested, like insurance, real estate. But essentially it works on the knowledge sources you give it. So just imagine you want a bot specifically to answer questions about procurement in Jamaica and maybe even using historical data like...
So Matthew, I personally use Microsoft's AI tool, Bing AI or Copilot. Copilot. But you see, many people know about the Chat GPT, but there are a lot of tools out there.
Yeah.
And for example, the Chat GPT is built on this large language model. You know more about that than me. Where basically you train a data set to give you responses in a human-like format and so on. But when we talk about predictive analytics in procurement, beyond a chatbot, or even if you're going to use a response supported by a chatbot, what comes to mind for the procurement process in general as it relates to predictive analytics? What other tools come to mind?
So I've been doing some research into this, into the tools currently, the popular tools currently used for procurement analytics. And it has led me to find a few. So there's one tool called Barware, which essentially it can utilize historical financial data to help with things like invoices and differentiating between, I think the term is non-PO invoice versus a PO invoice. So one that is backed up by a purchase order.
Right.
And even things like supply chain management, you have tools so that I think you have one called Zycos, another one called COPA for like spending analysis.
Yes.
So you have a lot of tools that have sort of been using AI in the background for a while. It's just that kind of what people call AI these days is really what you call generative AI. So it's the ability to generate human-like text responses, or even things like generate videos. You have a tool called OpenAI released it the other day called Sora, where you can literally just type in a description of what you want in the video, and it can literally create a realistic video of whatever you want. You have tools that generate images, tools like DALL-E. So even you can use Bing AI to generate an image. Cool thing about it as well, it doesn't just work with text. A lot of people don't know this, but you can use it to interpret images. So for example, or even documents. So maybe you have an invoice and you quickly want to, or maybe it's even just a long document, maybe it's a contract, for example.
Right, or a bidding document. Yeah.
Right, you quickly want to just find out what's in it. Instead of having to go through and read it carefully, you can literally just upload it into these tools and just ask a question about it, and it will literally either give you a summary, or you can even ask questions that you will use to reference these documents.
And I love that in terms of a summary, because if you know procurement, and some persons may call it a bidding document, a solicitation document, a lot of pages. So you're saying when a supplier goes to our portal, GoJep, which is our electronic procurement system, and they want to participate in a tender, and they pull down that solicitation document, they can upload it into a tool like that and get a summary. Mind you, I'm encouraging you to read the bidding documents properly, because that's how you're gonna stand a real chance in succeeding. But you're saying that we have tools that you can use to help you quickly get on track, start to prepare the what we call the qualification documents. For example, you could go into and say, hey, what's the qualification criteria? What qualification documents do I need? And you just sort of get to it.
Right. And the key thing about all of these tools is, just think about all the little tasks that you kind of have to do on a day-to-day basis that maybe you kind of shrug off because it's repetitive and you're so used to doing it.
Oh, but Lord, yes.
If you're supposed to add up the time that it takes to do these little tasks, you could save a whole lot of time if you just learn how to use some of these tools. even as I said earlier in the interview, something like drafting emails. So even drafting, helping to draft like contracts and documents, it helps me with that as well. Even preparing for interviews, it helps me as well. So preparing presentations. So you have tools right now where we all know how much time it takes to prepare a PowerPoint.
Yes.
Just imagine you have to present to maybe you're bidding for a contract or something like that, and you have to prepare a PowerPoint to the stakeholders. We know how much time that can take. You have tools right now where you can literally just put in the information, the description like in text, and it can literally generate a PowerPoint template for you with all the information.
Or as you're entering the images, and again, I lean a lot on the Microsoft tools.
Yeah,
As you're entering the text,
yeah.
it helps you with the slide design
Right, yeah.
based on the text on the slide.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
some pretty cool tools. I noticed you mentioned that we can upload documents.
Right.
Use the example of a contract. Sometimes a contract, well, not sometimes, depending on where you're in the process,
Yeah,
the contract may now have
Private.
personal information.
Right, yeah.
We can't talk about tech, artificial intelligence without talking about the privacy side of things. Now, why is it important to anonymize the information that we're putting into these tools
Right,
when
yeah.
using these AI search engines and the tools that you mentioned where we can upload?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these tools are great. They'll save you a lot of time, but you have to use it with care. Two problems, major problems. One, it can hallucinate, which means that it can make stuff up. So you need to ensure whatever response it gives you, you cross-reference it, cross-check it. Second thing is the information that you give it. Don't think that it's between you and the tool, right? That same information that you give it, they'll use it back into their training data. And there have been instances where some very sensitive information has been leaked. So for example, think of it this way. Let's say an employee from company X enters some sensitive data into ChatGPT. Let's say the company that runs ChatGPT uses that data to train their model again. Somebody from company Y, maybe by accident, asks ChatGPT a question. They can possibly get that information as a response back from ChatGPT, that sensitive information. So I always tell people when using these tools, ask a question in a way that's not too specific or using any sensitive information like passwords. Don't put anything with passwords or security keys or anything like that that could potentially affect the security framework of your organization. So ask the questions in a fairly generic way that can help you without giving away too much personally identifiable information.
Which would mean that if you're going to upload a contract to help with some interpretation, remove party A, party B information from those contracts.
Yeah, so as much as possible, try to remove anything that, if you think if it got leaked, it would be a problem, you try to remove that as much as possible.
Okay, great. When I speak with procurement practitioners, a lot of them will say that, hey, we are burdened with paperwork.
Yeah.
We don't have enough people, I hear they say sometimes. We can use these tools to be more efficient.
Right.
Practitioner looking on, what advice would you give in terms of a tool that comes to mind that can help with that administrative burden that they face? Paperwork, lots of calls, lots of suppliers checking on payments, the works.
Right. So, I mean, I referenced some of them, but I mean, even think of some of the tools that are normally used for, handling things like, finances, like the Zoho, the QuickBooks. A lot of them have AI tools integrated into them right now that can essentially help, your day-to-day activities go a lot quicker. Even a lot of the Microsoft suite tools that people use on a day-to-day basis, they actually have AI integrations where something like that. But yeah, the tools are out there. And especially a lot of the tools that you already use.
Yes.
If you actually look back at them, they know how most of them have some sort of AI integration that can essentially make your workload a lot faster.
Sounds good. I want us to backtrack several months. Elevate. First of all, for those who were not at Elevate, I mean, I was one of the moderators, I helped with the team to organize and so on. So I don't want to say it was good or not. What were your thoughts about Elevate? Because when we have it again, persons realize that, yeah man, this needs to be a conference that I want to attend, but how was Elevate?
It was a good conference. The panel that I was with, there was some good speakers and I had a good time. It was a very interesting conversation that we had,
Yes.
even close to the end, where we were kind of talking about how sort of we've changed as a society even using these tools and what are the implications going forward. So, it was some very engaging conversations and so definitely a good conference.
Engaging conversations, we had debates, we had plenaries, breakouts. It was awesome. So look out for Elevate when we're going to have it again. Now, we had that conference back in April. 8 months later, that's a lot of time in the tech world. We're speaking about predictive analytics. Has much changed since then? Now, looking on, can a practitioner, a procurement practitioner now say, wow, 8 months later, I may not have a job in 2 years because AI is going to take over?
Well, okay, so that has been one of the big question marks about AI in society. Will AI take my job? Especially when the advent of generative AI and tools like ChatGPT, people are scared out of their minds thinking that, all of these jobs, especially even the creative jobs, would have been taken by AI. So far, that hasn't panned out the way people thought it would have, because the fact is, right now, these tools aren't perfect. I think of them more as assistants rather than, say, replacements. So
Yes.
they can essentially supplant the human and make them better. That's how I like to think of AI. Think of it like you're the sidekick and you're the superhero, right? So you're still the main attraction, but it's kind of helping you in the background to be a better version of yourself. So make you more efficient, make you able to spend more time on maybe the more important things.
Agreed.
So it can do the things that maybe you find less important. So I think at least in the near future, probably next, say, 10 to 15 years, I think for jobs that exist currently, the tools are going to be, as that, tools. So it's going to be more of assistance helping anybody with their jobs do it more efficiently. I think as time goes on as well, jobs are going to change a bit more. You're going to have new jobs, so different types of jobs. Education system may change as well in terms of what kids need to know. Like, for example, I like to use the analogy of the calculator. If you can use a calculator to add, say, 1 plus 1 or, say, 2 plus 2, yes, it's important to teach a child, basic addition and subtraction and stuff like that. But I think as the tools get smarter, the tools can do those sort of simple things while it kind of frees us up to even explore more complex things. So, there's this thought that, AI is going to make us stupider because children don't have to do any work anymore. It does all the work. But I like to think of it this way. It can do the work that we already know and frees us up as humans to kind of do even more complex work.
100% agree.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm pretty sure persons had that thought when we invented the calculator.
Yeah.
When last you sit down and do a long division?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, we've been using calculators and we're not any less intuitive. I want us to talk about some more specifics though, about, let's look on the 10 stage, the 10 steps in a procurement cycle. I love to sort of visualize it, look at it in that light. So a procurement transaction begins with a need and it ends with you contracting managing that contract performance administration. So it starts with a need identification. Let us sort of look on the specifics. A practitioner looking on, a supplier looking on. A matter of fact, let's use an example. So we're sitting here, we said that we use procurement for almost everything. So procurement was involved in buying this table.
Right.
Procurement was involved in getting us on this podcast, ProCast.
Right.
Yeah. So the service provider we buy goods, works, and service. A service would have been procured here to arrange this podcast. So let's use this service as an example. So we wanted to identify the need that we have here. We probably had to do some research,
Right.
so see who was in the market, so on and so forth. Why would I use an AI tool versus going in Google and say, okay, podcast recorders in Jamaica, how can AI help? Could it have arranged with the supplier and contract everything for me? Let's start with the identification of need.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, you have specific tools that are created for procurement, but in terms of the question generally of why would I use an AI tool
For
versus-
identification of the need.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, even for something as simple as that, I've used, as I said, I think of AI as like my little assistant. So
Okay.
even sometimes I'm thinking of what I need for a specific task. I even sort of help use ChatGPT to help with that as well. And it kind of helps to kind of give me a starting point where I can even use other tools to help me on the other stages of that process.
Okay. All right. So step 2 in our process is where we look at the determination of the procurement
Yeah.
method. So we have what we call restrictive bidding, where we invite a few suppliers to come in, participate. You have what they call
Yeah.
single source, where you identify one and you proceed. You have what you call open national bidding. So depending on the value and the risks that are involved, you determine the procurement method.
Okay.
How do you see us using artificial intelligence to help us to identify the risks that are involved and even the value? So we can say, okay, we need to use this method.
Yeah.
We need to just do RFQs, or we need to open this up to national bidders. How do we use these tools to help?
Well, the cool thing about AI, machine learning, or predictive analytics in general is it can utilize historical data to help make predictions. So where I would start is look at historical data that this company has created throughout the years. So I would, any data that exists, whether that's PDFs, whether that's reports, Excel spreadsheets, all of that can literally be fed into the AI to help to make decisions. So the cool thing about these large language models nowadays, we have something called RAG, so Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what it does is essentially, you can essentially just feed it a knowledge source, whether that's PDF reports, whether that's Excel spreadsheets, whatever it may be. And you can essentially query whatever you want and essentially talk to it as if you talk to somebody. So for example, you're saying you'd want a recommendation.
On a procurement method.
Right,
based on
exactly.
Value, risks, yeah.
Right, so just imagine now you were able to feed all of that historical data on maybe the procurement methods you've used in the past based on the different scenarios.
Yes,
You
yes.
can feed all that information and then you can literally just say, okay, I have this particular scenario now. What do you suggest I use? And instead of making stuff up, it's actually going to be utilizing that data that you'd have fed it to actually give you relevant responses based on what you've done in the past.
Because, and I loved that you touched on the historical data, because sometimes as practitioners, we go to market
Yeah,
without adequate market research information,
right,
and then we end up having to retender because we received no bids.
right.
But if you had looked on the data, then you probably would have realized that, okay, historically, we tried this thing, Open National, 3 times that we had to retender. but really and truly, there are only that many players in the space, and then you could use that supporting data as well to determine, all right, you know what, based on the time that we have to get this thing executed, let's use this method.
Right.
So GoJep, for example, our electronic procurement platform,
Yeah.
contract award data, supplier registration data, PPC, and so on, you're saying we can use these available historical data sets, pour them into tools, make the determination.
Yeah, I think the key, before you even think about utilizing AI in any organization, you have to start from the data. So there are a lot of organizations right now, they are producing data, but they're not setting up sort of those pipelines to, manage and store the data, so that when it's time now to utilize those tools, the tools are going to be a lot better when you have that data already managed and stored in a proper way. So even as simple as kind of maybe moving from paper-based recording to digital-based recording. So I know there's been a lot of push by the government to move everything to digital. So that's a first step. You need to move all your operations to digital. It makes it a lot easier now when you want to actually feed that data into these areas.
Got you. So the next step now in that process sees us drafting what we call a tender call and then issue it. Go into market.
Right.
Whether we're gonna get it in the newspaper or we're going to upload it on GoJep. And I keep mentioning GoJep because you mentioned having the data, and it's where we are now. We're in a digital space, and that is where we are. Executing procurement in a digital way, so that we can have the data, so that there's transparency, so that more suppliers understand and know about these opportunities, so we can spread the money, right? Yeah. So when we're looking to now go to market, what comes to mind using these artificial intelligence tools to really save time?
Well, give me an example of, I guess, that go to market.
So we prepare so after doing that market research and so on, we prepare the bidding documents. And for example, if we're going to do a restrictive bidding, we'd upload it to GoJep and select the vendors that we're inviting to participate. It can be 10, right? Depending on the value, 3 or more, 5 or more. So you may be inviting 10 persons. So you select the vendors that you're inviting to participate. And when you publish, they get the notification via their emails saying, hey, there's an opportunity, you can participate. Another arm of that sees the procuring entity publishing. Have you ever seen in the newspaper where there a procurement notice? So sometimes it's also placed in the newspaper.
Okay, in the newspaper. Right. So, if you think about even that process of, drafting an email or, drafting something that you'd need to put in the newspaper, one idea that easily comes to mind is you could easily feed examples of, maybe newspaper drafts that you've written or even emails that you've written, and the tool can essentially, using those examples, produce, emails like you'd want to draft or newspaper drafts right away. So, so even that part of the process, you can utilize these tools, these large language models, to help you draft emails, draft newspaper articles and stuff like that.
And a lot of people don't realize it, but even a tool such as Grammarly, it's based on, to help you write and so on, eh?
Yeah, and think of any software you're using right now. There is some sort of AI integration involved right now.
So the next stage, the next step of the process sees us now, getting the suppliers involved. It's their time now. Ball is in your court. Submit your tender, submit your quotation, submit your proposal. Can we use these tools and how to identify fraudulent documents that are coming in, and what recommendations do you have to a supplier now that's also getting involved to respond, submit their tender?
Right. So there So fraud detection, that's sort of been around for a while now, and you have tools that already exist that do fraud detection. It's a lot more powerful now, with the advancements in AI. So yes, you can use these AI tools to even detect potentially fraud, because what they do is something called anomaly detection. It can essentially look at what is normal or what it expects to be normal, and if anything is sort of out of the normal, then that may be flagged as, hey, maybe something doesn't look right here, or maybe you should take another look at this. So yeah, definitely, even for something like that, AI tools can be utilized.
What about the suppliers doing the submission?
How do they normally do the submission?
Well, upload their documents using the steps that's required by GoJep, but they'd upload it through a tender portal, a tender submission tool in that platform.
Right. Well,
so you're talking PDFs, Word,
yeah.
zip file, that sort of thing.
Well, let's even think of it like on a broader scope. That entire process, the procurement cycle, you could actually, so you have these things that we call software agents nowadays. It kind of falls into the whole process of robotic process automation. But you can easily script some of these agents to carry out that entire cycle. Yes. So, from determining the procurement method all the way up to the execution of the agreement, you can actually set all of that up to be automated entirely using what we call agents. So anything that, again, you do repetitively, so whether that's uploading it to a particular site or something like that, you can literally set it up or script it to do that on its own.
I think that requires more conversations, because I'm now thinking about the complexities around the laws that we have. Because I know that there are tools for years that exist where in inventory management, you can trigger that reorder point. It can trigger an automatic purchase order. Yeah. It pushes that signed digitally authorized PO to your vendor, and they ship to your site. Mm-hmm. So, but now when you get to the parameters of our laws and our regulation now, removing the human beings from that process, it requires maybe another conversation that we can have sometime from now. So when you now get the tenders, they're submitted, gosh, there's a time now to evaluate the tenders. And a lot of times in the space, in the media, we hear that, oh my gosh, procurement takes long and so on. But there's this process. It has to take place, has to take its course. And there's a step called evaluation. Sometimes you try to get persons on the evaluation committee which is really you looking on the bids that are in front of you, making a determination on, okay, what is best value? Mm-hmm. You're going through the technical criteria, you're going through the financial criteria to understand what is best value. Mm-hmm. But you have to have people involved, you have to have a team. And we use the example of this service here, getting this podcast together. Yeah. So let's say we had 5 bidders. We're going to evaluate them. We're looking on the proposals, and a part of the package by this service provider is that they have to submit references. They have to submit the CVs for the technical personnel, and other documentation, including qualification. We talked about the ethical dilemma of fraudulent documents earlier. I have 5 submissions in front of me, a lot of documentation. Am I now able to upload, using the anomaly technology spoke about, upload these documents, and they tell me, all right, this supplier over here, they submitted a master's degree from Harvard University. Can a system just verify to say, yes, this person, the certificate has a number, is actually a graduate from Harvard? Mm-hmm. Or is there now a challenge with data privacy? Because you're now dealing with people's personal record. Do you recommend putting that type of information in those tools to verify?
Yeah, that's a good question. And every tool, every website that you use has their own user agreements. So I would definitely encourage everyone to, as much as people don't like to read those read it to see exactly what they're saying. But yeah, it's a tricky one because a lot of the things we do on the internet, we think it's private, but almost nothing you do on the internet is private, even when they say it's private, to be honest. So, even if you're reading through these user agreements and they're saying, okay, we won't send your data anywhere else, you still have to be mindful of what you're sharing with these tools. The good thing is, with the advancements in a lot of these, what we call large language models, you're getting to a point where you don't have to be sending the information to the cloud anymore.
Okay.
It's going to get to a point where it can run on your computer. So you don't have to worry about sending the information off to the cloud. Everything can run on your laptop. Just like how phones have gotten more powerful over the years, and your small, smartphone is probably more powerful than the big mainframe computers they had
30 years
in
ago.
the. It's the same thing that's going to happen with these large language models. So they don't have to be running on these big server farms anymore. In a few years, they're going to be able to run on your mobile phone or even on your laptop. So even the whole thing about data privacy, no longer would that information need to be sent over the internet or into the cloud. It can all happen on your phone or on your laptop or anything else.
Because the model is on what I would call on-premise.
Yeah, on-premise.
But isn't there a problem with that though? Because how do I know, we're going back to the actual application here, helping me to evaluate my tenders. I have the master's degree in front of me, several of them, several other certification requirements and so on. Instead of having to go and verify these one, would that information be offline though? For me to verify.
So if the model is trained, so the training process and using it are two separate processes. So more than likely it would be trained on examples of whatever you're checking for. So maybe on what to look for a valid degree or whatever.
Right.
But in terms of like the actual use of it, like if the model is on your laptop or on your phone, you won't have to worry about any personal information getting leaked because all of that computation is happening on the device itself. Okay.
One technical criteria that comes to mind when I'm evaluating on an evaluation committee recently, and so it was a service. So again, we use an example of service. You have a terms of reference. So we need a recording service, recording this podcast, and we need this type of, in terms of graphics, I don't know the technical requirements for recording a podcast. We need this type of setup, etc., etc. Make a proposal in terms of how this is going to be done based on what we gave you. And there was a challenge because the proposal was so close to what we had. It was almost like hard to determine, are you just giving me back for what I asked for? Versus trying to determine, all right, this is unique to what you're proposing that you're going to do in delivering this service. Can I use a tool to sort of remove that subjectivity and help me to properly identify if they're giving me back this thing too close to what I presented to them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about AI. Think about anything that you would have to normally do. So even that process of trying to figure out if, maybe they're just submitting back the same thing. You can essentially customize these models to do whatever you want, right? So if that's the problem that you're trying to solve, there may not be necessarily off-the-shelf solutions for specific problems.
Yes.
But there are ways to get it done. It may require some practitioners to kind of get involved, like developers or IT people.
Is the talent available locally?
Good question. I think so.
Yeah.
But it's what you'd say it's raw talent.
Okay.
Right. So our association, we work closely with the government as well. So there's this thing called the AI task force.
Nice.
I think one of the the things they want to do is kind of set up like training centers to kind of get more people in Jamaica, ready for the field of AI.
Very good.
So I definitely know the raw talent is here because, some of those are even in my very association.
Very good.
But, it would be good if we have that sort of link to, people that are, say, more experienced in the field, maybe even from other countries, to kind of do that knowledge transfer to kind of get our people kind of up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were to say on this podcast, ProCast, what resources are needed to get that raw talent up to speed to help with our procurement space to remove a lot of the administrative burdens? And I can tell you, people want a procurement process that's faster.
Yeah.
They want a procurement process that's more transparent, and they want value for money. So if tech can help, you're a part of the Jamaica Artificial Intelligence Association. What resources do you think you need to get that raw talent up to speed?
Well, I mentioned one of them. So there's a knowledge transfer. So definitely, if that could be set up in terms of reaching out to, partners, whether in the region or abroad, to set up a knowledge transfer for, people that are, experts in the field, to transfer that knowledge to locals here. Even just computing resources, a lot of people are interested in the field of AI, but maybe don't have the money to kind of get into, that research, or even just being a practitioner in the field. We need the computing resources for that as well. So I think it's going to come down to the government, working with the people that are actively in the field, especially the young people. Yes. Working with them, trusting them, believing in them. Because I think that's really the key thing here. It's really just believing that the talent is here, and try to work to maybe bring the talent up to the standard that we want it to. But
globally acceptable standard.
But I know the talent is definitely here.
Okay. Back on that cycle now, Matthew, the procurement process, we're now at a stage of selecting the supplier and then executing an agreement, which is that contract formation space. Right. Now, we've spoken a bit on the whole contract formation and using contracts. I'm going to move past those two. Yeah. Let's talk about contract performance. Now, there's a big A that's also involved in procurement, and it's accountability. Holding our contractors, suppliers, goods, work, services accountable for the work that they do. And one of the things that really stands out at us is roadworks, and it's something that affects everyone daily. And we often hear it. Now, the Public Procurement Commission, the PPC, they now have this contractor performance management system, right? That's not the exact name for it, but it's really meant to be a database where suppliers' ratings and performance are captured and can be accessed by practitioners. How can we use these tools? I know that once I mentioned data, it's probably all good, but how can we engage AI in that process to better help practitioners backtrack to market research, to the beginning of the process, because they have access to that performance data?
Well, it starts from, what are your KPIs? What is a good performance for you? So you can actually input that information into the tools. And then from there, it can, again, it comes back, really and truly, it comes back to the data. It can utilize the data to, make decisions as to, that process, as you said, going back, even from the very start to the market research, of figuring out sort of, how if the performance is matching up to where you want it to be. But the key thing at the end of the day is a lot of these tools, you can essentially put in your KPIs, what you're trying to optimize, and it can assess and evaluate whether your suppliers or whether your stakeholders essentially matches up to the standard that you're looking for.
So we have the standards, we have the KPIs,
Yeah.
but then it oftentimes still requires the human input. Can we automate the evaluation of the suppliers? Is that even possible? Or you need a human being to go in and do that,
I think
assessment?
so. I think so as well. And easily I can see where that could possibly be automated.
Give us an example of what comes to mind.
Well, whenever you're trying to automate something, the first place to start is to use an example. So again, historically, you've probably had contracts in front of you or had suppliers that you're evaluating. And depending on the context or the different scenarios that said, okay, that's a good evaluation, that's a bad evaluation. All of that information or all of that data that would have been produced during that process, that's usually why it comes back to companies finding some way to store as much data as possible. Because that process of you evaluating the contract, as a human, you can essentially use that information now to train a model to do that very same thing that you would have done in the past. So whenever it gets a new contract now, that sort of that thinking process that you would have done, it can now automate that to evaluate a contract.
Let me give a scenario. So, road is repaired, an agent from one of the agencies have to go out, do their check boxes, and so on. Internet of Things,
Right.
devices. Have a device on a vehicle, similar to how Google Maps would drive around and sort of map things out. Could there be a device, a physical device, like you'll have something to pick those coconuts, right? You have it on the car, and you remove the human element of saying, yes, this road was repaired properly. Is there such a technology? Is it possible? And you just need to drive on the road, and sensors are being used and so on, and it's mapping that data back into a system, and you're basically just automating that decision that yes, this road was done properly or it was not done properly. Can we look at automation in that light?
That's a good scenario you raise, and it comes to proper monitoring procedures for whichever job you're evaluating. So let's use a roadworks example. You know about the Jamaica eye system, cameras all over the place. This, along with the use of drone technology, can be used to essentially learn to detect, even from just spatial images, or even using infrared to detect potholes on roads. So it can use that along with, okay, from the time that the road work was done to how long it took for it to, maybe a pothole to form in that road. Maybe you have like a standard that, okay, if the road work was done properly, it shouldn't take less than, say, 6 months for a possible pothole to appear in that road. So, all of that information, and that's where things like Internet of Things can come into play, because you have sensors, and a camera is a version of a sensor. Drones would be versions of those sensors as well. Can be used in the field to, in real time, capture information like that, and utilizing other, contextual information like time, weather conditions. You have sensors for that as well. All of that can be pulled together to make predictive strategies, essentially, and evaluations as to, hey, was this done properly or was this not done properly?
Right. And what's most important is really just capturing that data so you can use it.
The key is setting up proper monitoring strategies. The roadworks example, even it's a difficult challenge. I'm not saying it's it's trivial in any sense, but it's possible. It just requires proper monitoring procedures, and I think with the use of, say, cameras and drones, it's possible. Or even crowdsourced data, like users. We see potholes every day when we drive. There's probably a pothole. They say every day you go on the road and you say, why is that still there? An app could even be set up where users can say, hey, there's a pothole on this road. And that could now feed into some sort of government system, and it correlates with other users saying, okay, multiple users say there's a pothole here, so there's likely, the AI can say, okay, there's likely actually a pothole there. And, you know, it can use that information along with, you know, cameras to even determine the severity of the pothole, because that pothole, maybe it now correlates that with accidents on the road. So it realized that there's a lot of reports of potholes on that road, and also a lot of reports of accidents on that same road. Yes. And maybe a correlation could be drawn that, hey, maybe we need to place more priority on this pothole because it may be a cause, because cars have to be swerving from these potholes that can potentially increase the likelihood of an accident. So
very good.
Yeah, that could even save lives possibly.
So that's an example of a works, some physical things. Let's say we wrap up this session now, and we're ready to appraise the service provider here, and their output is a video, right?
Okay.
This ProCast. How could we use an existing tool to make a determination that this was done well? Does anything come to mind? Because let me tell you, we and again, we buy a lot of things in government procurement. Advertisements, photography, videography services, a lot of things. So it's just beyond goods and works. Using this example of a service, we're at the end of the contract and we now need to appraise the performance. Can we, coming out of this conversation, decide that we're not going to appraise it manually and give us a tool that we can use?
Well, if the input is a video, so the cool thing now is, you know, we're moving from just text and images to now AI being able to understand video. That's kind of one of the frontiers that are currently in development, but it's getting better at just, you know, giving it a video, it can understand what's happening in there. So yeah, it's gonna reach to a point where you can just put a video in there and you can ask questions about the video. So you can say, you know, do you think that or was this video produced properly? Or so, just a basic question like that.
And you have to teach the criteria of what does proper looks like for.
Exactly.
Okay.
So as I said, if you can think of the criteria, that criteria you can feed to the AI, and then it can use said criteria to make evaluations. That's the gist, essentially.
What is the next step for my practitioners that's watching in terms of really becoming more efficient?
Yeah.
And some are even staying away from these tools. But what's your takeaway recommendation for my practitioners in terms of a really practical next step?
Practical next step, I would say, really learn what tools are out there. You know, don't just see AI happening and not get involved with it. It has to be an actual effort that you take to learn the tools, learn what tools exist, actually start using them, even if it's as simple as even starting to use something as simple as ChatGPT, something that everybody probably knows by now. I think, you know, it will kind of help to change your mindset, because maybe people are afraid of change, generally. People are afraid of change.
Absolutely.
And, you know, there's a lot of myths that go on, especially when there's new technology, you kind of run from it because maybe you think it's going to take your job or something like that. But just think about what you could be missing out on. And what you're missing out on is having a much easier life, more efficient working process. It can make you a better human being in general, I think. So my advice to practitioners in general is to learn what's out there. Start using the tools in your everyday tasks. Start using them and start benefiting from AI.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Great conversation. And thank you guys for tuning in. You can find the Office of Public Procurement Policy at procureja.gov.jm. So thank you again for tuning in.